prepared for the tenants when they move into the property. It's something that we get asked a lot of times, and you know, again, we want to try to have them feel welcome. We look at this as these are it's like a business. We look at investing as a business. These are like clients to the business. These are like our customers. So we want to have what they need there. So we want the kind of the essentials, and the essentials are, you know, you want to make sure that they have a copy of the lease and they have the correct hydro utility contacts. If there is a
garbage day is.
If there is a property manager that's going to be taking care of the property, they have that contact information. They have proper access to all the rooms and the home and that type of thing. We also want to make sure that the little things are in place for them, like all the light bulbs are replaced and working, that the fire alarms are working. So all that little stuff you want to do, like, yes, it will be their responsibility to change a light bulb afterwards, but when they move in, we want to make sure everything's working. So things like the appliances, you know, if we get someone that moves in and 2 days later, they're like, hey, the appliances aren't working, we're not making a big deal about it. It's likely they didn't break it in 2 days. It's likely that there was a problem with it to begin with. We apologize and get it fixed right away. You know what I mean? Those types of things. So we want to make sure all that stuff is in place when someone is initially moving into the property.
And not only is it nice for them, but it sets the expectation that we care for the property. Yeah. So we expect them to care for the property in the same manner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have that discussion with them. And then we do a walkthrough with them, and we get them to sign off on the condition of the property and different rooms and things like that. There's all sorts of software you can use now that actually will do this for you, or you can take a picture of the property. They can sign off on it on your phone and iPad and things like that. So you can do that type of thing. Use that type of product if you're looking to do that, or you just have something on paper like a checklist. You can get a checklist and have them sign off that everything's in good condition. So we will do that type of stuff. And again, it goes to setting the expectation that, hey, look, this is the condition. This is the condition we expect it to be in afterwards as well. You can go above and beyond. You know, we've done this sometimes. We haven't made a regular habit of it, but some people have, where you have some sort of welcome basket for them. Maybe it's a bottle of wine. Maybe it's a really cool one that's just like cleaning supplies. You know, if it's their first house, people don't realize
it's a really cool one maybe for us to give them.
No, but it happened to us too when we moved into our first house. A friend of one of my wife's friends brought it over. You don't realize how much stuff you actually need. Right? There's all these little things that you might not have yet if you're moving into your first place, and you don't realize it, and people just appreciate that stuff. Home Depot gift card, that type of thing. I don't know if there's anything else.
No, that's good.
So the next question is, what about damage to the property? How do you handle damage when you know, if there's a repair concern comes up, something's, I guess there's two parts to this. One is if something breaks at the property, how is it handled? And one is if something's damaged to the property.
And damage, I think, that's a number one fear, especially for new investors. And we can tell you from dealing with thousands of properties at this point that is an overplayed concern. But it can happen. And the way to protect yourself the best is to do what we mentioned in a different segment, where you take pictures of the property and get the tenants to sign off on the condition of the property before they move in. Because if you were ever to go to a tenant board here in Ontario and claim something for damage on your property, you need the before pictures. You can't just say the property was in a certain condition. You actually need to show, and you need to have the tenants signed off on those pictures. So that's something that you want to do. And if you do have that, there is a chance that you will be compensated for damage, but you do need that proof. If you're really super concerned about damage on the property, you can actually buy insurance for tenants in a property that insures you against damage. You're going to pay a little bit more for insurance, that type of insurance, but it does exist. So if you're like super petrified about damage on a property, you can purchase insurance for that if it ever was going to happen to you. There's multiple insurance companies that offer that kind of thing now.
Yeah, the other side is if there's a repair needed on the property, it's just, you know, whatever process you have put in place for it. So if there's a manager, they will contact the manager, and the manager typically contacts you to get approval, and it gets repaired. Or you either have a contact that's going to repair, maybe you're someone that can repair yourself. Well, that's very simple, right? You can just take care of that. And, you know, things from normal wear and tear, things happen to properties. I'd say we haven't had too much stuff, but like the big stuff over time that goes, furnaces and roofs, obviously those need to be replaced just from wear and tear. The other most common one would be appliances. Appliances just stop working. And then literally we just call an appliance repair company that we have a relationship with, and then we put we give them the tenant's information, they book the appointment, they go fix it, and they bill us for the repair, and that's it. If there becomes an abuse to something where it's, something's being broken over and over again, well, then we have a discussion with, then it's no longer a repair, then it's more damage being done, and we have to have a conversation with the tenant and say, hey guys, look, here's the expectation, this is what's going on, and just kind of have open communication. But with this type of stuff, the key has been, that we found, the key has been to have a process in place. So if there's a repair request or damage, here's how it's handled, and those are the steps that get taken, and it's very simple to get it resolved. I'm stumbling over myself here. I think that's it, right?
Good.
Okay, and everyone's favorite question, or one we get a lot at least, is like, well guys, what happens when they don't pay? How do you guys handle non-payment of rent issues with your tenants? And I can tell you from working with a lot, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of investors, I know, seeing a ton of properties of this, these concerns are overblown as well. Depending on your jurisdiction, there's a pretty straightforward process in place to handle these types of issues. Usually there's some sort of notice that's given to the tenant, and then there's steps to be taken to rectify that. They usually have a period of time to pay rent. If not, it goes to some sort of hearing. Again, depending on where you are, there's either like landlord, like some sort of board, tribunal, court that they go, and then it's usually pretty straightforward. If they haven't paid rent, that an eviction order is issued. There are extenuating circumstances to everything, but the extenuating circumstances, like the myths that it's like, well, it's January, so they can't be evicted in January because it might be cold. Well, that's not really the case. Those types of things we've
that one persisted for some time.
Oh yeah. So that's not really the case. Most of the time, I've seen them look at the tenant and say, hey, look, you can't live here for free. So you got to leave. So, but that's pretty much it. But again, it's more important to have a system. So I think the key to this is, if there's non-payment of rent, at least the key for me, I don't know how you feel about this. There's two keys to this, and I very upfront in having this conversation with the tenants at the beginning. I'm like, guys, look. If there's going to be any rent issues, you need to communicate with me, because if you don't communicate with me, I'm going to assume the worst. And then as soon as there's a rent issue, we file notice. So in Ontario, it's the N4 is the initial notice that we file. We file notice right away. And they might pay us. They might be planning to pay us the next day, but that way the tenant knows that when there's no rent being paid, they're getting the notice. Right? So we've set the expectation up front that, guys, this is how it works. You need to communicate with us, and we're filing notice right away. If they don't communicate with us, then we just proceed with the process, very smoothly. Keep going with it.
And most of the time when we hear that someone can't get a tenant out of a property, it's because they haven't followed the process at all.
Yeah.
They've bought into the tenant's stories, and the tenant has said, hey, I can't pay this month, I'll pay you in 2 weeks. And they wait 2 weeks, and then the tenant says, oh, I can't pay, but I'll pay you next month.
Here's $100.
Yeah, I'll pay you, here's $100, and next month I'll pay you for this month and next month. And the next month rolls around, and then you get another story. And they've bought into that. The landlord now is the problem, because they bought into this like 2, 3, 4 months, and they're now complaining to other people that it's really tough being a landlord. But the problem is that they didn't follow the process that like every jurisdiction has in place. And the process probably isn't perfect, but it works fairly well. So if you hear those stories, it's usually the landlord that's been the problem, and not specifically the tenant that has been the problem.
And it's ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a business transaction. We look at these people as customers, so we want to treat them well. We want to do good by them. However, just like if we owned a retail store, our customers can't come in and take the stuff off the shelves and walk out without paying. That's not allowed, and them living without paying the cost of having to live there is not allowed either. So we don't want to be unfair to them. We're actually, I'm always willing to work with tenants as long as they're living up to their obligations as we go, and they communicate. Yeah. And they communicate through the process. It's the number one most important thing, and that's why we have that discussion with them up front of when they're moving in, of exactly what's going to happen if there are any rent issues. This is kind of how the path we're going to go down. But at the end of the day, you can't get emotional about it, because some people might. They're like, oh, I don't know, I feel bad. You know what?
It's a business.
It's a business, and they can't live there for free. No, you be fair to them, but they can't live there for free. No different than if you owned a store. They can't be shoplifting from you and taking the goods and merchandise for free either. So the other question we get is like, what about the constant visiting that you're gonna have to do the property? Like, do I really want to manage this property because it's going to take all my time to be there on a consistent basis? And that's that hasn't really been the case. When people ask us, well, how many times do you think I would have to visit the property, or should I visit the property? We just generally go, We don't go probably as often as we should.
Well, it's really dependent on what your insurance company is asking of you. So if your insurance company is saying, hey, you have to go by the property once a quarter, then it's once a quarter. If it's 2 times a year, then it's 2 times a year. But that would be the first thing to check, what the insurance company is expecting you to do. So it's really
into a habit. I think most investors probably go by the most common approach that I've seen is a seasonal inspection. So, twice a year. So when I mean seasonal, I mean one going into the winter, because that's the time to look at furnaces and things like that, and one coming out of the winter. So typically when the clocks change, if you want to use kind of a rule of thumb. And that's the time to go in. You're entitled to go in and do an inspection. You give notice. You can see the condition of the property, have them sign off. You can do an updated checklist with updated pictures, and you have them sign off on the... So the rule, if you want a rule of thumb, it can be when the clocks change, and at that time you can book an appointment to go in. You can take an updated checklist, so you have an updated record of the condition of the property, the same checklist that they signed off on when they moved in, and you can go through the property and just say, hey, everything's looking good. You can snap a couple pictures, get them to sign off on it, say thank you very much. That's a really good best practice to go about. That way, for the insurance reasons, it's good. For any non-payment of rent issues, maintenance issues, all that stuff is taken care of if you take that approach. But it doesn't have to be a constant you got to
go in there every week.
3 weeks. Exactly.
Okay, so that's a wrap. This has been the steps that you should go through for getting your first investment property. And if you want more information about investment properties, you can come out to the class that we do here at the Rockstar offices. You can go to CanadianRealEstateTraining.com. We share all the property types, the strategies that we've used with thousands of investors. I can't even speak on thousands of properties. And what we try to do there is share what's going on the streets. What are the rent rates that we're seeing, how fast it's taking to rent out properties, the price points we're seeing in different areas, right across Ontario at this point. So we hold that in our offices here. You can go to CanadianRealEstateTraining.com to sign up and grab a seat. And you want to do that because our classes are always packed. So you want to save yourself a seat. And you can get that at CanadianRealEstateTraining.com. And we outline some of the details that we discuss at that class on that website as well.
And the other thing is, if you're looking just for some more insight into markets, and you're a person that kind of likes to dive into things and wants some information, there's a couple different reports about what's been happening with prices, with the impact of the transportation changes in the area, what's been happening with immigration levels. There's a number of and how that's been impacting the market. So a number of different real estate trends and what's the different things that are impacting the market. All those reports are available at rockstarinnercircle.com/reports. So it's just ROCKSTAR innercircle.com/reports. You can get that type of stuff there, as well as other videos, podcasts, and all articles. All that type of stuff is on at rockstarinnercircle.com if you want to check that out as well.